Welcome, and to all of you on a Tuesday morning. Peter Bleksley's here. It's a pretty grim report, this, Peter, but it's pretty much confirming everything that you and I have been saying for quite some time over the past several years, right?
For a long, long time.
Yeah.
And if you are not outraged by this story, then quite frankly, you are not British.
Yeah, there's something wrong with you.
So get a passport, go to an airport or a port and get as far away from this nation as you possibly can, because this is a scandal of a monumental scale. It is appalling. It is a stain that I suspect will never be expunged from this nation. No matter how many more investigations we have, no matter how many people get locked up, no matter what the conclusions of this judge-led statutory inquiry that we're going to have, the stain will never go away. And I'll tell you why it won't go away. Because of the victims. The children. The children. The children that were demonised not only by local authorities, social workers, police officers, but also, and it has to be said, certain elements of the media who gave them titles that I'm not even going to repeat here, but they called these children all manner of names when what in fact they were vulnerable children repeatedly being failed.
And quite frankly, often being trafficked as well, because, you know, people were talking many times, whenever we would talk, particularly Labour Party politicians would say, you know, these are isolated incidents, these are things that went on, you know, in certain towns, you know, you can't draw any kind of conclusion about them all being, you know, part of one mass movement. But in fact, many of the victims have said that they were taken from one town to another town to another town. There was one on TV the other day saying that it started in Telford, then she was in Oldham, then she was in you know, Blackburn, then she was in Edinburgh, then she was in Leeds, and then Rotherham. You know, they were passed around the country like sort of cattle.
Trafficked.
Yeah, trafficked.
Trafficked and used for the most
So there's a conspiracy here, isn't there? It's not just a conspiracy of silence. It's a criminal conspiracy.
Huge, absolutely.
Right.
And Baroness Casey alludes to it yesterday as well. And she talks about links possibly also to drug dealing, so like county lines. So these girls were trafficked, just used, objectified and abused on an unparalleled scale for the perverted sexual gratification of men who clearly couldn't get it properly elsewhere. And it is this scandal is going to run and run and run. We need to support the National Crime Agency, who are going to be leading on this. They've got some experience now because they've had their Operation Stovewood running for a while, which has secured some convictions in Rotherham. And in fact, 3 men went on trial yesterday.
They're still going on, aren't they?
There's
trials coming up all the time.
Yeah, but because it is not merely historical offending we're talking about here. Whilst, of course, some of the victims have been denied and let down for decades, there are victims that were trafficked and raped probably last night.
Yes, exactly right. And there's one of the rape gang victims, you'll know the name, Sammy Woodhouse. She's actually calling the Daily Express today for Keir Starmer to resign. Because there's more and more evidence coming forward that when he was head of the Crown Prosecution Service, yes, there were some prosecutions, but there were an awful lot of cases which were not brought to justice on the recommendation of the Crown Prosecution Service, which he was heading.
He was a fundamental part of an establishment that did not collect the data on those few offenders that were prosecuted and on those offenders about whom allegations were made. And why was that data not collected? Because they wanted to cover up the truth. They didn't want to expose the level of offending by Pakistani origin men because they didn't want to upset that bloc Muslim vote upon which so many MPs, be they Labour and some of the independents are now sitting in the House of Commons. You know the ones, the ones who want an airport in Pakistan.
That's exactly right.
Who think it's more important to stand up in our House of Commons and talk about that kind of nonsense rather than what Baroness Casey exposed yesterday.
Exactly right. And so let's look at the dates here. 2008 to 2013, that's when Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions, head of the Crown Prosecution Service. In 2009, a year after he got in, the CPS was criticised for not prosecuting Rochdale grooming gang suspects in 2008 and 2009, and their reasoning was the main victim was unreliable, in their words. So they dropped the case, right? In 2010 and 2011, child sexual abuse prosecutions reached 4,794, which was the highest during Sir Keir's time as DPP. But after he left in 2016-17, nearly twice as many prosecutions, 7,200.
And I hope victims now will forgive me, because I've had a very quick change of thought here. So I'm going to use some of the terms that were attached to these child rape victims. There you've mentioned one word, unreliable. Do you remember when they were called child prostitutes?
Yes, I do.
Around these matters.
And there was lifestyle choices being made, weren't there?
Yes,
You know.
They didn't have choices, these kids. They were being trafficked and
being
repeatedly
drugged, most
raped.
of them, and drugged.
Yes.
And forced to drink alcohol and all sorts of things. In 2013, a Home Affairs Committee report said, unlike other agencies, the CPS had readily admitted victims had been let down by them and have attempted both to discover the cause of this systemic failure and to improve the way things are done so as to avoid a repetition of such events.
And the head of that organisation is now one of the most deeply shamed Prime Ministers we've ever had the misfortune to live in 10 Downing Street.
He's now the most unpopular Prime Minister of all time. Officially, again, something I've been saying for ages, he's even now more unpopular than Gordon Brown. And after this, I think he's going to be... I wouldn't be surprised if this finishes him off, to be honest, because, quite frankly, you know, the state of his... You know, denial back in January. We played a lot of the clips yesterday. We're going to play them again today. His denial in January, calling anybody who wanted to jump on a far-right bandwagon because they wanted a national inquiry into this, right? He didn't want to do it. He didn't want to go anywhere near it. He appointed Baroness Casey to have a look into it, and he expected her to come back and say, it's not worth having a national inquiry. And guess what? She didn't do that. She decided it was time. And so now he's making out like he's had some Damascene conversion because, you know, now somebody legally has told him that it's what he should do. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
That far-right bandwagon, which you and I have been riding for a long, long time, according to Starmer's interpretation of things, has just driven hundreds of horses and coaches through this government and trampled on their pathetic reputation.
Yeah, exactly right. And as if to sort of show just how ludicrous the whole system has been, one particular grooming gang ringleader who was actually jailed back in sort of 2012, I think it was. He was locked up for 77 years, right? He was then released into the back into the population. He was supposed to have been deported, right? But he still hasn't been because he basically gave up his dual Pakistani citizenship, and so we apparently now can't deport him.
Surrendered
he's a taxi driver.
Oh, so many of them were taxi drivers. And of course, Baroness Casey made considerable mention about the lax licensing laws that allowed them to get away with them, and of course, transport these kids around the country. But that character you're talking about there, that verminous piece of filth who was a child rapist, surrendered his Pakistani nationality 5 days before he was due to go in front of the appeal court. And then, of course, they can't deport him because he surrendered it. It's a nonsense.
It really is.
You should be able to say, exceptional circumstances, off you go, you piece of garbage.
Or if you want to stay in this country, we'll put you back in prison. Or something like that, you know, forever. Even The Guardian have had to put it on their front page today. That tells you something, because you said members of the media. I mean, how many times have you sat on panels in television studios and been told that you're a right-wing racist bigot for even bringing the subject up? Who can forget just the other day, what's her name, Lucy Powell, having a go at Tim Montgomery when he suggested that there was a problem and referred to a Panorama documentary, and she said, oh, we're going to go for that old dog whistle, are we? Remember that? You know, Lucy Powell still has an awful lot to answer for, and she said nothing as far as I can see. I watched Jess Phillips last night talking about this, and even she is now saying that she's going to have to, you know, study the facts to see whether or not it's true that Pakistani men are overwhelmingly involved in this kind of activity, because of course she's desperate to try and get away from losing her seat, which she will lose if apparently she upsets anybody in her Pakistani community in Birmingham. Have a look at what she had to say yesterday.
What Baroness Casey has recommended, which we will undertake, is the mandatory recording of ethnicity of perpetrators of child sexual abuse. What she has looked at, admittedly, just in 3 police force areas in the review, found an overrepresentation of Asian or British Pakistani origin males. It doesn't matter how I feel about that. Those are the facts. And if we ignore that, how can we ever come up with solutions?
Well, yeah, but you did ignore it for years and years.
And she's so wrong, because actually it really does matter how she feels about that, because it shows whether she's on our side or whether she's chosen some other kind of side in this absolutely disgraceful national scandal. And I'll tell you another reason why it matters, because yesterday Yvette Cooper said, and I quote, "This will take all of us." Okay? All of us to get to sort this matter out. She was addressing the nation. You, me, listeners, viewers, all of us, she said. So Jess Phillips' views do matter, and we all must, in some way, shape or form, apparently, play a part in doing this. So, what do I interpret that as? Well, where are the community leaders amongst the communities that were doing this systematic repeat offending? Have we heard from those within the Asian or Pakistani communities?
I've not seen anything.
No.
I've not seen anything at all. And one of the problems with all of these areas where it happened is that they are mostly run by Labour councils. They are mostly up to their necks in it. Many of the people who worked in the councils, many of the people who worked in the police, many of the people who worked in the community, they all knew what was going on. Some of them were even carrying on the actual behaviour itself. That's the amazing thing. Let's have a look at Yvette Cooper finally admitting yesterday what we've just known all the time.
And she refers to examples of organisations avoiding the topic altogether for fear of appearing racist or raising community tensions. These findings are deeply disturbing, but most disturbing of all, as Baroness Casey makes clear, is the fact that too many of these findings are not new.
Exactly right. They're not new. We knew about these findings. We knew, those of us who talked about it knew about it. They didn't want to admit it. That's not the same thing.
My deep, deep concern is about accountability. Because Cooper yesterday talked about accountability of organisations. But she didn't say individuals. Now, there's a crime called misconduct in public office. So if you're a police officer, social worker, anybody who gets paid out of the public purse, basically, and you commit misconduct, that is a crime. You can be charged, you can go to court, and invariably people that are found guilty of that crime face pretty stern punishments because you're a public official or a publicly paid person. Now, misconduct in public office is a very unusual crime because doing nothing can constitute that crime. You see, with most crimes, you have to do something.
Absolutely.
You know, you clump someone, you steal something, you drive when you're drunk, you know, you do an illegal act. With misconduct in public office, you can do nothing. In other words, ignore it. In other words, do nothing when you should be doing something. So, I hope that the National Crime Agency and this inquiry, as part of their workload, look in to trying to prosecute individuals, those cowardly police officers who, in their desperation to climb the promotion ladder, didn't rock the boat. Nothing to see here. Move along. We're not going to go and investigate these people and charge them. Those people, I want to see them in the dock.
Let's have a look at the Yvette Cooper apology from yesterday.
On behalf of this and past governments and the many public authorities who let you down, I want to reiterate an unequivocal apology for the unimaginable pain and suffering that you have suffered and the failure of our country's institutions through decades to prevent that harm and keep you safe. But words are not enough. Victims and survivors need action. The reforms I've set out today will mean the strongest action any government has taken to tackle child sexual exploitation, more police investigations, more arrests, a new inquiry, changes to the law to protect children, and a fundamental overhaul of the way organisations work to support victims and put perpetrators behind bars.
Now, those of you who are watching that will see that she's flanked on one side by Bridget Phillipson, Secretary of State for Education, and Angela Rayner, Deputy Prime Minister, and Secretary of State for Housing and Levelling Up, I think, right? They look about as grim as can be because they know exactly what they've been doing over the course of the last several years, and they know exactly what they've been... Who can forget that picture of Angela Rayner sitting in that room with all those Muslim men before the election, promising them that they would absolutely, if they got elected, you know, campaign for a free Palestine, for a start, right? Now, let's have a look just back to January, only 6 months ago. This is where they were.
Calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right, then that affects politics.
No, the reason we're not doing another national inquiry is because there's already been a national inquiry.
Do you want an inquiry or not?
No, Paul, I'm trying to answer your question, and the answer is no. We don't think another inquiry, after all the many inquiries that we've put victims through, is the way to tackle this.
There has been a huge amount of misinformation this week. Sadly, party political misinformation. It is just wrong.
We've already had a lengthy inquiry, which ended...
broad inquiry that encompassed some parts of the, you know, some towns, 6 towns, I believe. 50 towns have been blighted by this issue. We don't know if it's still going on now. That inquiry was a much broader inquiry.
So you're right in saying it's broad, but we've got to look at you know, what Professor Jay has said as well, which is that this doesn't need a further inquiry, and actually it's time for action.
Betrayed by the state, Peter. I don't think there's a better headline this morning. That's the front page of The Sun. Tony says this: police, politicians, lawyers and the mainstream media hid the truth about rape gangs. Starmer must know some Labour Party officials are deeply implicated. And Mick says the disgraced police chiefs, councillors, CPS lawyers and social workers must be exposed now. Some are now MPs and are still in positions of power. We've got so much to talk about. Welcome back to Morning Glory, 25 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham. It's one big story in town this morning, although there are other things that we will be bringing you over the course of the next 3.5 hours. Ryan Saby, for one, over in Canada, where he is with Keir Starmer and the rest of the G7 leaders. But the front pages this morning very much tell the same story. And the story is, as I said, even on the front page of The Guardian, in which they say the ethnicity of grooming gangs was, in their words, shied away from. A culture of blindness, ignorance and prejudice led to repeated failures over decades to properly investigate cases in which children suffered appalling abuse and violence from grooming gangs. This is the report authored by Louise Casey, who said for too long the authorities have shied away from the ethnicity of the people involved and said it was not racist to examine the ethnicity of the defenders. I mean, it's of the offenders, rather. It's almost like you don't have to say that. Why should you have to say that to people who are investigators? The police, you can answer for them because you know how the police system works in this country. But, you know, what I don't get, and I asked this question yesterday, is why would people be frightened of causing, you know, community tensions by arresting some ghastly, creepy, horrible rapists, no matter what their ethnicity was?
So how do the police and governments have such clear data on stop and search, so they are allowed to say, as they always do, you are 7 times more likely to be stopped and searched if you are black or Asian? How do they have that data? Because it is recorded. Each stop and search is recorded. Like each arrest should be recorded. The ethnicity of the offender should be recorded. Why wasn't it? Because they, once again, like we've discussed earlier, were afraid of the truth. They didn't want to rock the boat. The Labour Party don't want to upset their bloc Muslim votes. The police didn't want to upset Pakistani Muslim communities because they're cowards.
But my point is, Peter, and I take all that, and I know all that, but what I'm saying is that why would you be upsetting a community by rooting out the most vile, ghastly criminal elements of that community? If you came to my street and said, we're going to take those people there and we're going to lock them in the back of a police van because they've been robbing everybody else, why would I turn around and go, oh, but what about the community cohesion of the street? We don't want to do that. Why would people not want these ghastly, horrible rapists to be taken out of their community and put behind bleeding bars?
Exactly. And
people who don't want that to happen should also be prosecuted.
Well, back to Cooper's point that this is going to take all of us to resolve this matter.
Yeah.
I very much look forward to hearing from Pakistani community leaders, imams and all that kind of stuff, stepping forward, coming on Talk perhaps, to say how much they condemn the offending and how much they will assist the authorities in rooting these offenders out and seeing them where they belong. Let's look forward to that,
That would
shall
be
we?
nice. And also, isn't it also rather despicable, and I use that word carefully, that Keir Starmer announced this over the weekend because he had a heads up, obviously, on this Baroness's report. He knew it was coming. He'd had it for quite a while, in fact, as it turns out. And he announces it literally as he's about to take off and get on a plane and go to Canada for a G7. So he has not really been in any way, shape or form held to account yet. But he will be when he gets back.
And do you know why he's done this? He's done it to protect his position.
Yeah.
He's done it to retain power. He's done it for himself.
Because he doesn't fancy the idea of what this inquiry is going to dig up. And that is absolutely and utterly true. Now, the other thing that people, that I've been saying and you've been saying as well, is what about all these illegal boat migrants that have been coming here? What have they been up to? Have a look at what Vivek Cooper's got to say about asylum seekers.
Baroness Casey reports that she came across cases involving suspects who were asylum seekers. We have asked her team to provide to the Home Office all the evidence that they found, so the immigration enforcement can immediately pursue individual cases with the police. But let me make clear, those who groom children or who commit sexual offences will not be granted asylum in the UK. We will do everything in our power to remove them. I do not believe the law is strong enough that we have inherited, so we are bringing forward a change to the law so that anyone convicted of sexual offences is excluded from the asylum system and denied refugee status. We've already increased the removal of foreign national offenders by 14% since the election, and we're drawing up new arrangements to identify and remove those who have committed a much wider range of offences.
I mean, what sort of country have we become that you have to say that you have to say that we're going to deny you the ability to seek asylum in this country if you commit sexual offences against children? I mean, hello?
That change in the law is just complete waffle for as long as we are bound to the European Convention on Human Rights, because that creates pathways through which people can appeal any decision made in this country.
Right, and she also used that caveat within our powers. Everything within our powers we can do.
Because...
Which means we're not going to do anything.
Because they don't want to withdraw from it.
No.
I understand it's complex and the Northern Ireland, you know, the Good Friday Agreement is tied to it and all that, but look,
Don't get me started on released IRA terrorists.
But let's just look at this. This is a national scandal.
Yeah.
It's on every front page of the newspapers.
Some people are calling it the biggest cover-up ever in Britain.
And it is therefore, in my opinion, a national emergency.
Yeah.
We should be invoking special powers to assist the investigators and those so that we can remove from this country all these offenders after they've served their time in jail. Straight onto an airplane, straight out of this country. Let's call it what it is. It's an emergency. Let's have emergency powers and let's deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely right. Couldn't agree more. More of your messages coming through. You can text them to us at 87222. You can voice note us at 0344 499 1000. Here's one from Tony.
Morning, Mike. Morning, Peter. It's Tony from Nottingham. I'm a former police officer. I've spoken to you before. One question I've got is, when I was in the police, one of the big things they used to go on about all the time was hate crime. So one ethnicity targeted another, for instance. Now, to my understanding, none of this grooming has been treated as a hate crime. And I wonder if Peter knows why, because I don't, and I've asked the question. And I feel sure if it was large groups of white men targeting Muslim girls, it certainly would be. Thank you.
Good question. Why is it not a hate crime?
Take a bow, Tony.
Yeah.
There's a shiver going down my spine as a result of him mentioning that. What a great point he's raised.
Absolutely.
What an absolutely brilliant, on the nail point that he has brought to our attention this morning. Yes.
And he's a police officer.
Why are these not classified as hate crimes. There clearly must be an element of hate.
Surely there must be.
Derogatory names that they called these victims.
Well, also, it's a racial motivated attack, surely. You know, they were only raping white girls. They weren't raping girls, they were raping white girls.
That is an astonishing point.
Surely that's a racial crime, isn't it?
Yeah.
A hate crime, surely.
Yeah.
Well, we'll try and get Yvette Cooper on the show. Some chance of that. Got more chance of deporting that bloke from Pakistan who hasn't got a passport anymore. Anyway, listen, this is, of course, the home of common sense. This from Richard. What's the likelihood that we'll hear the rhetoric from the authorities? We'll learn lessons. And Jill from Cheshire. There's something very sinister about a country's leaders who refuse to want to protect its citizens, especially their children. It makes them complicit and dangerous. I worry, along with you, that high-profile people were involved and the system is frantically trying to protect them. I've got no doubt about any of that, Jill. Absolutely right. The people who listen to this show and watch it know more than this government does, and I'm sick to death of having to ask the question, why did this happen? Why are they covering up? Why, even in January, did they tell us that they didn't think there should be an inquiry? And now they're all running around like they've just gone, oh my God, I've discovered gambling in a casino. You know, idiots. No, I think Keir Starmer, as you've just said, Peter, because this is a state of emergency, because there should be an emergency, situation, there should be a statement from Keir Starmer. It should have been one yesterday, and there should certainly be one today. If he's going to wait till tomorrow, that'll be yet another sort of weaseling out of something, won't it?
We know this abominable man only commissioned Baroness Casey to look at this because he was boxed into a corner.
And he hoped that she would come back and say there wasn't any need for an inquiry.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Exactly.
Because all of these facts that are coming out and all of those things that Yvette Cooper said that they've now discovered, surely they must have known about these things inside of the government. I'm not talking about the local, Labour councillors. I'm talking about inside of this Labour government. He was the head of the CPS, for heaven's sake, as he always tells us.
And on that very note, of course, as Yvette Cooper told us yesterday, hundreds of cases, possibly going into the thousands of cases, are going to be looked at again, where victims did not get justice, where people said, no, not enough evidence. They're going to have to be looked at again because it's felt they were probably inadequately investigated. Because, of course, what were people routinely saying? Nothing to see here, move along now.
Exactly. And now they're going to review, this is on the front page of the Mirror, 1,000 rape gang cases, review them, the ones that got away, as it were. It's extraordinary stuff. Coming up, we're going to look at some of the other stories in the paper. We've got another Islamist chucking boiling water over a prison warder. Smoky bacon crisps have been vetoed by the European Union in a new rule that has been made since Keir Starmer reset the Brexit deal. And the Spanish, apparently, are taking away sunbeds. So when you get to your resort, you'll have to lie in the sand on a towel, just like the old days. 6:43. Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to 6:46 in the morning. Peter Bleksley's here with me. We've been covering the one big story that there is to be talking about this morning, and that is, of course, the grooming gangs report, the Baroness Casey report, which came out yesterday. Betrayed by the state is what it says on the front page of The Sun. We'll come back to that, because coming up we're going to be talking to Katie Lamb MP, Shadow Home Office Minister for the Tory Party, and also Sarah Pochin from Reform, about this dreadful, ghastly story and why and how it could have possibly happened in the way that it did. But a couple of other things to mention, Peter, while we're here. There's been another incident inside a prison. This time another Islamist young offender has somehow been able to have a kettle in his cell. He's boiled the kettle, he's added some sugar to it, and he's chucked it over a prison officer.
And of course, boiled water with sugar added to it sticks to the victim.
Right.
And increases the scalding and the damage.
It's like toffee almost, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty horrible, truly hideous. And it's
how's he got a kettle in his bleeding cell?
There you go. That's what you get in a liberal, fluffy, woke karate world, where prisoners' rights and privileges would appear to be more important than the safety of staff. And that is, of course, utterly shameful. But of course, it's symptomatic of what goes throughout our public service. The police, the prison service, all these staff that work for them are all this left-leaning, not all, majority of this left-leaning liberal kind of nonsense. And they drive these agendas, and that's why you end up with prisoners not going to jail for long enough, being released too early, and prison staff not being suitably protected.
Exactly right. I remember talking to a prison association representative who said that one of the reasons why they don't, for example, wear body armour in prison is because the powers that be didn't want them to look too confrontational.
Yeah.
And you go, what do you mean? Of course you're going to be confrontational. These are the lags. These are in prison for a reason. You're not about to be nice to them. And apparently, from what we hear from Robert Jenrick, an awful lot of prisons are now being run not by the prison officers, but by these Asian gangs.
Yep.
Muslim gangs.
That's the same powers that be that do not patrol the landings and sit in their offices thinking they're extremely important because they've got a lanyard round their neck. Probably a pride lanyard.
Probably.
Yeah, and then of course they're so important.
Colours.
Yeah, they're so important, and they want everybody to know it, that they wear that lanyard on the train on the way home.
Oh yeah.
They're the sort of people that have wrecked and continue to wreck this country.
Yeah.
Where on earth is the common sense where people say best person gets the job, prison staff have more rights than offenders, they should be protected, and the such like.
Yeah, it's not difficult, is it?
No.
Now, this one will really wind you up if you're a fan of Brexit or if you're not a fan of the European Union. So Keir Starmer, of course, famously just a couple of weeks ago invited all the European Union leaders into Downing Street and decided it would be a really great idea to reset the European relationship, right? So that we've now given away more of our fishing rights. We've given them more money to stop the migrants coming. None of that has actually worked. We've also signed up to some more food trading standards, rules and regulations. And it turns out that as a result of that, British crisp manufacturers have to change their recipes in order to serve the masters in Brussels. And smoky bacon flavour, apparently, is one of those that's going to have to change its recipe because, according to the EU rules, some of the ingredients in smoky bacon flavoured crisps might cause cancer.
There we are, all thoroughly
well played,
beholden.
Sir Keir Stalin.
Yeah, exactly. Beholden to the EU once again.
Right.
When did we rejoin the EU? Did I miss it?
I think you missed it, yeah.
Did I?
Yeah, it was a very stealthily done operation.
Yeah, clearly.
And under the cloak of darkness.
Yeah.
It was carried out without any of us knowing.
See, I thought once upon a time we voted to leave the EU.
We did.
Did we?
Yeah, by a majority.
Yeah.
But Keir Starmer didn't like that because he wanted to have a second referendum. Do you remember?
Right. Oh.
He said we should have a second referendum because politics doesn't just happen in one period of 24 hours, does it?
No.
Maybe we should have another election while we're at it.
Well, maybe if
why don't we do that?
Maybe if you are a supporter of Brexit and you continue to criticise the ever closer relationship that we're having with Europe, perhaps you're just jumping on a far-right bandwagon.
That's very possible, and it's dangerous, that. Although it tends to happen that if you do jump on a far-right bandwagon, you're actually just on the right bandwagon.
Correct.
Because it turns out that that's where you should have always been, because that's where the truth is. So the Prime Minister has now agreed that this must be done. So smoky bacon crisps will have to be completely reinvented. What a load of old cobblers.
Yep. One thing that I took from this story that did make me smile, though, is that there is a body called the Potato Processing Association. And I think that's brilliant. I'd love to go to their Christmas party.
You know, I'm surprised that, and this, you may not know this about me, but I applied for some very strange jobs when I was trying to break into journalism. And I'm surprised that I didn't apply to be the editor of the
Potato
Processing Association's, annual thing, because I got shortlisted, believe it or not, and I've told this story many times, to be editor of the Shoe and Leather News, which was based just around the back of Old Street.
Yeah.
I got shortlisted, and apparently I only didn't get the job, the guy said, because I was too young, because I was only 21. And he said he thought I might not have enough experience of shoe and leather. But,
cobblers.
Cobblers, indeed. How about Royal Ascot starts today. Lots of apparently the King is harbouring lofty hopes for the mother of all victories on the opening day of Ascot. Apparently he's got a horse called Reaching High. For those of you who like a little flutter on the Jesus, we'll be talking about this a bit later on, actually, with the Sun's tipster.
Well, do you remember when his horse won? Obviously inherited from his mum, who absolutely loved Ascot.
She loved horses.
And there he was, all dewy-eyed when his horse won. And what about when the Queen eventually had a winner at Royal Ascot?
She was brilliant.
That was unbelievable that afternoon.
Yeah, everybody loved that. And this one will really get your goat as well if you want to have a bit of a row with the Europeans. It's page 17 of The Sun. The sunbeds in Mallorca are cut back by nearly a quarter. It works if you read it like a Cockney.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very good.
The rain chase.
Apparently, grouchy beach bosses are scrapping nearly a quarter of Mallorca's sunbeds on popular beaches in a bid to put off tourists. I don't know what's wrong with the Spanish lately. You know, they seem to have worked out that it's better if they don't have any tourism, which of course will mean that they've hardly got much of an economy to begin with. They haven't got any tourism. You might as well forget about it.
Yeah, there's been protests and unpleasantness, and people at the weekend were running around squirting tourists with water, apparently, out of water pistols. There was some question mark as to whether it actually was water, but it wasn't making tourists feel very welcome or very much.
I find it extraordinary why they're doing this, you know. And people, of course, in Britain, you know, stiff upper lip and all that. They're quoting hairdresser Nigel Oxby from Doncaster, who says, "I'll just come down with my towel if I really want to go to the beach. There's tons of other beaches with nothing on them. If you're a local and you don't like tourists, then there's other places to go." I mean, I remember when I was a kid, you go to beaches all the time that didn't have any sunbeds on them. You know, it's not like the end of the world, is it? You just you know, set yourself up, you get yourself a little umbrella. And lie on a towel. Well, even covered in sand.
Even when I was like in my younger days going on 1830s holidays, yes, guilty as charged.
Okay.
Had a wonderful time.
I'm sure.
Absolutely loved them.
Yeah.
But you couldn't afford a sunbed in those days.
No.
So you stuck your towel on the sand anyway.
Right.
Because they charge you a few
It's one of those
pesetas.
things that you now kind of, you go to some of these resorts and the ludicrous nature of the charges where they go, do you want one in the front row?
Yeah.
And they want you to pay some ludicrous amount of money for it.
Yeah.
And then if you don't want one in the front row, the third row is a little bit cheaper, the second row... When I was in Dubai, they didn't charge you for that. In fact, I had a guy, and this is how great it was there, a guy came up to me and I thought, oh, here we go, he's going to start selling me some shells or some watches or something.
Yeah.
Because he's got a little black bag. And he walks up to me, and I'm on the sunbed, and he goes, "Excuse me, sir, would you like me to clean your glasses for you?" And I went, "Yeah, all right then." So he took my glasses, he had this little, you know, gizmo, cleaned them, gave them back to me. Didn't ask for any money or anything.
Really?
Brilliant.
Did you feel like you should have, you know...
I mean, they rinsed me at the front desk, don't worry. But, you know, so I got my glasses cleaned for free, but there we are.
Well, on this very story, there's somebody called Pere Jean, I'm Joan, forgive my pronunciation, 26, from an organisation called Less Tourism, More Life.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe that's a sort of Spanish Just Stop Oil type
I suspect it is, yeah. Yeah. Jets privados. Stop private jets, I suppose that means. And there's, I mean, get a life. These Spanish need to get a life, really. Meanwhile, back in the old world of political correctness, apparently using the word gents is an old-fashioned... not inclusive and unacceptable word to use in today's offices. There was a tribunal case where a woman was objecting to the fact that her boss used to send emails starting with "Good day, gents," or "Good morning, gents," or "Gents, this is what we're up against." I mean, I can see how, you know, that might not be the best idea you've ever had.
Yeah, and they've added it to lads, because there was another case a couple of weeks earlier.
Right.
Said lads. Now, all right, I mean, if you're in a men's football team, I think you could probably walk into the changing room and say, "Good morning, gents," couldn't you?
Or lads.
Without having to go on a blooming tribunal for saying it.
You would think.
But if you're in an office where there are both men and women, then perhaps...
And it turns out her unfair dismissal claim was rejected by the panel, so at least there's some hope of common sense in the world.
Yeah, the judge said, the word gents is a bit kind of, you know, a bit clumsy, but it doesn't constitute a negative finding against them. So a little bit of common sense appeared to have reigned there.
Yes, thank goodness for that. Let's get a voice note back on the migrant freebies from Andrew, because this is about what's going on in Kent.
Andrew from Perthshire. You're talking about driving lessons for migrants. I'm a flight instructor and I know at least 3 migrants who are taking flying lessons.
Flying lessons for migrants? That's a bit worrying. Remember 9/11?
Yeah, exactly.
Eh? I mean, they took flying lessons in Florida.
On that note, let's remember, the Sun took photographs yesterday of people getting on more boats.
Yeah.
The Home Office data isn't available yet. I've been checking. Right.
It was a free-for-all yesterday in France.
Yeah, so we'll find out later on today how many came in. 1,500 in 4 days last week.
Yeah.
1,500 in 4 days. Asylum seekers. And what did the report from Baroness Casey say yesterday? Oh, yes, some of the child rapists are asylum seekers. This is a state of emergency, special legislation. Now, stop the boats, kick out the pedos.
Stop the boats. It's unbelievable, isn't it? How on earth can that still be the case? This from Chris in Croydon. Mike, they're not grooming gangs, these are rape gangs. It's time that we remove these people from our country. If the country of origin refuses to accept them or let them apply for a passport, we immediately sanction them, ban all of their citizens from coming here and withhold all foreign aid until they do. Absolutely right. Betty says this morning, Mike, from Glorious Zurich this week. Clean, safe, working. No scroats in face masks on bikes. 20% tax. Everyone working, contributing, and a public transport system that works. That's in Switzerland.
I went to Rome last week. I had a great pleasure of going to Rome. Now, Rome
used to be a place you'd worry about going because of all the street crime, but it's probably not as bad as it is here now, is it?
Half as much crime as in the UK.
Right.
And twice as many police officers. Do the maths, it's pretty simple.
That is pretty straightforward, isn't it?
It really is.
But again, it used to be that you would go to places like Italy and you'd marvel at the fact that they could even run the country because they were so politically unstable.
Yeah.
And there was so much criminality going on the streets, and you get your purse stolen or your handbag nicked or your watch stolen. But now, we seem to have imported all of that. So we've got all the people committing all the crime, and the rest of Europe is actually a lot better.
And the police officers I saw last week, by crikey, male or female, you wouldn't want to row with them.
No.
There was no huge, great, obese ones waddling about, you know what I mean?
Right.
They all looked like they could shift some furniture.
Yeah.
The overwhelming majority of them were armed, and there was always a readied hand at or on the weapon.
Yes.
They looked the business.
Right.
Their uniforms were impeccable, pressed, you know, shoes polished, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You could have eaten your dinner off the
important.
bonnet of their police vehicles.
So important.
Yeah.
And they weren't painted in rainbow colours either.
No high vision sight either.
Amazing. We've got time to play Andy's voice note. Let's get it on.
Morning, Mike and Pete. It's Andy from Birmingham. You're both right, lads. I mean, saying that it's a stain on our nation, this grooming gang scandal. It'll never be erased, but all we can try and do, all of us, I mean, she's got Yvette Cooper's about all of us, but I mean the public as well. We've got to push and try and get justice for these poor girls. And while I'm on as well, does that mean the little Sadiq Khan in London's going to have an inquiry? Because I think he was a bit quick to put doubt on that a few months ago when he said he wasn't having an inquiry. So will he be forced now to have an inquiry? Anyway, lads, good day. Ta-ra, mate.
Andy, thanks very much indeed. We've got lots more coming up. Thanks to Peter Bleksley. Good to see you.